Welcome to Connect at 51, the online Connect group from Midtown C3 Church, Manhattan. If this is your first time watching this video, watch the video until you see a question screen like this, then pause the video and share your answers with the group. Then continue. There'll be 7 questions today, and the first one is this. What do you think is the most popular thing that people searched for on the internet in 2019? In 2019, the most popular search term was Disney Plus. In other categories, the top baby-related searches were Baby Yoda, followed by Baby Shark. The top movie search was Avengers Endgame, and the top fashion search was something called an e-girl outfit. So today, we're going to talk about cultural relevance. And to begin with, we're going to read a line out of 1 Thessalonians 2. It reads, "You yourselves know, dear brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not a failure." Okay, well, let's just pause right there for a moment. When anyone claims that something wasn't a failure, the very phrase indicates that it was a failure on some level. Something must have gone wrong, so let's just rewind to Acts 17 and find out what could have possibly gone wrong. Acts 17. Paul and Silas then travelled through the towns of Amphipolis and Apollonia and came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As was Paul's custom, he went to the synagogue service, and for 3 Sabbaths in a row he used the scriptures to reason with the people. He explained the prophecies and proved the Messiah must suffer and rise from the dead. He said, "This Jesus I'm telling you about is the Messiah." Some of the Jews who listened were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, along with many God-fearing Greek men and quite a few prominent women. So as we read this, Paul and Silas are traveling through Greece, and they come to Thessalonica, a thriving port town and military base. And in just 3 weeks, Paul has planted a church here. That's some pretty impressive church planting skills. So what can you learn from Paul's evangelism technique? Now let's break down his strategy. First, he goes to the synagogue. This is familiar territory to Paul, as he was taught by the top teachers in the synagogue. He knew the culture, he knew the people, he knew the words that they were reading. So the first strategy he used was to reach the people that he could identify with. Secondly, he speaks the language that they understand. Being at a synagogue, they were familiar with the Old Testament, so he used what they already knew and pointed them towards Jesus from there. For someone who doesn't know the first thing about prophecies or Isaiah, that's not going to work, but you can use any language that people speak to point them towards Christ. For the Baby Yoda person, you connect using Star Wars. To the Avengers fan, you connect with superheroes. The point is, Paul is being culturally relevant to the people in the synagogue, and it lets him connect quickly and effectively. So let's read what happens next. But some of the Jews were jealous, so they gathered some troublemakers from the marketplace to form a mob and start a riot. They attacked the home of Jason, searching for Paul and Silas so they could drag them out to the crowd. Not finding them there, they dragged out Jason and some of the other believers instead and took them before the city council. "Paul and Silas have caused trouble all over the world," they shouted, "and now they are disturbing our city too. And Jason has welcomed them into his home. They are all guilty of treason against Caesar, for they profess allegiance to another king named Jesus." The people of the city, as well as the city council, were thrown into turmoil by these reports. So the officials forced Jason and the other believers to post bond, and then they released them. That very night, the believers sent Paul and Silas to Berea. When they arrived there, they went to the Jewish synagogue, and the people of Berea were more open-minded than those in Thessalonica. So, as you read this, what similarities do you see in this passage to what is happening in our culture today? We are living in an age of weaponized misinformation. Lies and smear campaigns can ruin careers, bring down governments, and literally start riots. Whereas now we have social media that can spread this misinformation, in Thessalonica 2,000 years ago, their version of social media was to go to the town square and accuse Paul and Silas of essentially domestic terrorism. Now, let's digress from the Bible for a moment to discuss the context of what's going on. For those of you familiar with Julius Caesar, you may know that he was assassinated by Brutus and other conspirators, and a civil war broke out in the Roman Empire. On one side you had Brutus, Cassius, and the other assassins, and on the other side was Octavian and Mark Antony. Their final battle of this massive civil war was a clash of 200,000 soldiers on the plains of Philippi, where Brutus, the traitor, was defeated, and it led to Octavian becoming the first Roman emperor. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Thessalonica was an important military city, and guess whose side they were on? That's right, they fought for Octavian, and because of their support for the emperor, they earned the title of becoming a free city. So given this, what was so effective about the accusations that were made against Paul and Silas? This city had just recently received the rare reward of becoming a free city by the emperor. They got this by showing loyalty to Caesar and defeating the treasonous traitors. So you can imagine how there would be a very patriotic sentiment of being very pro-Caesar and a very heavy persecution to anyone that showed a hint of treasonous behavior. It was the hot button topic in this city. It was trending. So if you wanted to cancel Christian culture in Thessalonica, calling them traitors to Caesar and calling them troublemakers was the way to do it. It was essentially painting Paul as another Brutus that needed to be hunted down and eliminated. And it worked. It started a riot. Innocent people were dragged into the streets. People were arrested. So just as Paul succeeded in using the culture that he was familiar with to evangelize, these enemies were extremely effective by using culturally relevant information in their own way. It was such a successful attack that the very next day, Paul and Silas were sent away, very likely because they would be killed by the persecutors if they were found. So on the surface, it looks like the Christians lost and the persecutors won here. So how is this not a failure? On the surface, a 3-week mission trip ends in riots, arrests, and running away from the city. Not what initially seems like a successful start. But despite this, seeds were planted, and the church in Thessalonica actually began to flourish. Admittedly, there was still persecution and violence, but the church endured it and grew. In fact, it's believed that Paul's first letter that we have in the Bible was the one that he wrote to the church in Thessalonica that we now know as 1 Thessalonians. This so-called failure established the church in this region and has led to 2 letters that have endured for thousands of years that we can learn from. So now as we come to the conclusion of this context-setting study, the challenge we would like to set for you for the next 2 weeks is for you to read the 2 letters of 1 and 2 Thessalonians. These 2 books are a total of 8 chapters, and you can read a little bit every day. I hope that you can join us in this challenge. So to conclude with, after exploring the events in Thessalonica and seeing how they mirror what's happening in our world today, the final question is, how can you be a culturally relevant Christian?